Welcome to this webinar endorsed by the International Ergonomics Association. My colleagues and I are very pleased to be here today with you for the first time. We would like to thank Rosemary Siva, head of TCs, for her help in organizing this webinar. And of course, we would like to thank also Alexandra Gamber for her technical support today. So thank you both very much. This webinar joins two theses. On the one hand, the Ergonomic Work Analysis and Training TC, chaired by Marta Santos from Porto University in Portugal, and I from the Arts and Crafts National Conservatory in France. And on the other hand, the TC Gender and Work, chaired previously by Marie Laberge from Montreal University in Canada, and now by Christelle Casse from Lyon 2 Lumière University in France. The idea of this meeting burst last year during the International Congress of our association in Jeju Island, Korea. We'd met each other for real after years behind our screens. And all of us had a little time to think and to dream about what we wanted to do together, what we wanted to promote in ergonomic approaches and science knowledge. Theoretical, but of course, methodological one. Against this favorable backdrop of exchanges and initiatives, we decided to build a project that would link the members of our two TCs and, of course, beyond. As TC chairs, we knew that some researchers of our two TCs are linked by these two theses. And we thought that it would be a good idea to invite a colleague who builds bridges between these two scientific domains. Professor Céline Chatigny is an expert of the two domains and an early member of both technical committees. Based on over 20 years of practice of research and teaching in occupational health in Québec University in Montreal, Canada, her experience is truly invaluable. And it's really a privilege to be able to benefit from her expertise today. So without further delay, it's an honor to introduce Professor Céline Chatigny, whose title is Online Seminar, Occupational Health, Vocational Training, and Gender. My Little Story of Ergonomic Crossroads of Three Parallel Roads. Are you ready, Céline?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll give you the floor for about 45 minutes. And Marie, Christelle, and Marta, I'll let you ask questions whenever you think it's necessary. A recommendation for the audience, feel free to ask a question in the Q&A file. And if you have technical comments, you can use the comments. After the presentation, Professor Céline Chatigny will have time to answer any question you may have. Okay, so Céline, it's time. To beginning with, could you describe your field of work and your global approach? Could you explain the origin of your interest in health and safety at work and ergonomics? Because when we look at your publication, these two areas seems to have marked your whole professional life. What do you think about that?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you, dear colleagues, for this opportunity to share my work. Thank you, all of you. I will be very happy to receive your questions and comments. Okay, just to resume, my research interventions, teachings, trainings are participatory, multidisciplinary. And you have seen my three axes, OHS, including physical, mental, social well-being, sex and gender as the influence work, health and training in the sense of vocational training situations. With two analytical frameworks, the ergonomic activity approach in real context, the sex and gender-based analysis, with some contributions from other disciplines. My outlook, inclusion and retention of women and men in their training and work trajectories, and the recognition of so-called manual jobs, and in particular those that are traditionally male or female. Looking back, I can see better the origin of my concerns. My representations of work OHS are really in relation with my family and professional history. I saw the tired bodies of my father, a bricklayer, and my mother, a seamstress. They made do without complaining. I learned resignation and pride in a job well done. My student jobs exposed me to physical risk, sexual harassment too. I sometimes choose to flee, but I understood the importance of OHS and training. In my wonderful job as an educator in the field of intellectual disabilities, I have seen the effects of overload and lack of resources, accidents, injuries, absence. I became aware that OHS is collective, both in its failures and its successes. I choose to get involved to improve living conditions for children and working conditions with for staff. When my tired back gave out, I decided to go back to school to study OHS. I learned a lot. I just pushed that. I learned a lot about OHS, but I wanted more because psychological health and the combination of causes remained timid. Worker participation, there was no mention of women workers, and prevention were limited. Until I discovered the ergonomic approach to work activity with Nicole Vézina. This is a truly systemic approach to the work situation. The person's work activity in context is central. The activity is the individual's response to the environment in a bidirectional relationship. I choose this work to illustrate that initially we can be blind by appearance. An important concept in ergonomics is the relationship between prescribed work and real work, and that to transform conditions, we must take the time to understand and get closer to the complexity of the work and the people who perform it. Here you can see my three mentors and the people who played a special role throughout my career. Several are members of the EWAT and Gender and Work networks. I hold them a lot. With Nicole, I learned to quiet confidence that the approach, the choice of methods, and the analysis are patiently developed with partners. With Karen, I learned to integrate women at every stage. Upon returning from a data collection session with my colleague Julie, Karen asked, "What did you observe about the work methods of the man and the woman?" Well, we'd forgotten. Catherine Tégère, I pay tribute to her. When I met her, I knew that if I did a PhD, it would be with her. Whoops, sorry. She taught me to dig deeper, to analyze and conceptualize my articulation of skills and health, working conditions and learning conditions.
You talked about your ocean ergonomic approaches, but could you now explain the roots of your sex and gender and vocational training approaches, please?
Yes, okay. Thank you, Christelle, for this question. I will begin with sex, gender, and OHS with two examples. We know that sex corresponds to biological, physiological characteristics. For example, women are generally shorter than men. Their height particularly influences the height of which they can grasp objects. The concept of gender helps us understand reality. For example, the sexual division of labors is a social construct that has an impact on the health of both women and men. Indeed, work is often tough off by men for men considered tall and strong. They therefore often perform dangerous and heavy tasks. For women, let's take the example of telecommunication technicians. The union wanted to understand why they were leaving, even though an equal access program was in place. We observed the activities of women and men and conducted interviews with workers, colleagues, supervisors, managers. Initially, the women discussed the problem of protective equipment, gloves, tool belts, then the training for handling ladder, which only one technique was proposed, regardless of the person's height. Little by little, they talked about sexist and sexual harassment from colleagues, bosses, customers. Then, the lack of support and recognition. Results: anxiety, isolation, lack of learning opportunities, and desire to leave the job. Some male colleagues suffered from this situation, which they observed without reporting for fear of being excluded from the team. Power relations were the elephant in the room. Marianne Lacombe, 2024, in a tribute to Catherine Tégère, writes, "The structure of gender relations in the labor market and within companies requires ergonomics to no longer overlook the fact that equality between women and men in the workplace is far from being achieved, also in terms of working conditions." Karen Messing illustrates the vicious cycle of the invisibility of women's health issues at work. When a woman encounters a problem, the common reflex is to question her physical, mental state, to think that she isn't cut out for this type of work. Developing a gender-sensitive approach is necessary to avoid situations of exclusion in the very process of research and intervention, and tools do exist. Marie Laberge and her team have produced a superb study of strategies for integrating gender into the studies of Research Center Symbiose members, which has led to the development of a tool for thinking about the integration. Now, about ergonomic analysis of work and training, I have a question. What use do we make of training? I'll let you read the quote from Taylor and Garvey in 1959. You know the Taylor of Taylorism, reported here by Leplat. I give you some seconds to read the quote. So maybe a wallpaper. "This is why I'm interested in training, to give it its rightful place and no more, in its relationship to other determinants of activity and to experiential knowledge, and so that the occupational health and safety of women and men is not treated independently of task-related skills." On the 1950s, Leplat, followed by de Montmolin, pointed out the relevance of activity analysis as a prerequisite to training. Tégère clearly positioned the two possible statuses of work analysis for training as a tool and as an object. I have sometimes used both aspects within the same intervention. For example, in the context of training for prevention officers and workers in Latin America. In the great work that you see, the image, the book Tégère and Lacombe, they have drawn up a reasoned assessment of these contributions. In 1990, Nicole Vizina was working on reducing musculoskeletal disorders in slaughterhouse. A worker told her, "I've been cutting meat for 20 years, and no one has ever shown me how to sharpen my knife. When the knife doesn't cut well, the cut is less clean and it takes more time and effort." I approached this question of the OHS training-production relationship with the conviction that the ergonomic approach would provide a systemic perspective to understand the situation. This was consistent for me and Nicole with the discipline's objective, which is primarily to adapt work to the human. Sharpening some findings. Sharpening on a steel at the workstation is more complex than it appears. It is performed between two cutting cycles without dedicated time, yet it requires an average of 11% of working time. The action guidance steps of Savoyan were useful for my analysis, anticipation, execution, and control. It is necessary to assess the condition of the knife, move up the production line by cutting more quickly, estimate the amount of maneuvering time gained, sharpen, and then resume cutting, often with a delay. Proprioception must also be maintained to sense the condition of the blade in preparation for the next sharpening. Using pictograms to facilitate verbalization with a group of workers, we co-analyze and compare the techniques. This allowed us to identify the advantages and disadvantages, as well as the determining factors. An approach to this critical activity from a learning perspective opened up several possible transformations. The training provided practically no benefit. Designing training related to the activity was therefore also necessary. I was starting my doctorate in Paris with Catherine Tégère. Nicole and her team worked with worker trainers from several factories to design training for trainers and workers, including the development of a dynamometric knife to measure the impact of sharpening on cutting performance during training. And a new cycle of activity analysis was initiated for sharpening on a grain stone, carried out upstream of the work on the chain, which was one of the determining factors of the condition of the knives. So when I started my doctoral studies in 1994, I wondered how workers could develop their skills in such a tense environment. I decided to compare the situation in a slaughterhouse where training was being developed with the situation of water network workers from whom a highly developed training program was in place. In addition to interviews and activity observations, I conducted participant observation during training at the plant and followed the water workers at the training center and outside when they wanted to discuss work. Main findings. At the plant, offline training was well coordinated with work activities, but the transfer of learning to a production context remained problematic. A significant limitation was what Sylvie Ouellet subsequently studied in depth. The trainers provided information on what to do, it was previous, less on how to do it, and rarely on why to do it. In the water sector, the training was prescriptive, and the trainer refused any intervention from participants who tried to talk about their context. To compensate, in the evenings, they discussed their difficulties and strategies. In both cases, various strategies to develop operational resources were deployed. Transforming a tool, cutting time to experiment with a new technique, building an informal network of colleagues, friends, and resources outside the company. Meta-functional activities, so important as Fazon detailed, were not valued or even prevented. So they found a clandestine path to enrich the activity and the collective, which had good and bad effects on health and production. Maybe you may be wondering what I made of gender in this masculine context. These are virile environments where brute strength is valued and pain is trivialized, especially in the agri-feed industry. But gender issues have slowly resurfaced, particularly extreme pain. One experienced man cried during an interview, telling me that every time he comes back home, he has to go to bed instead of spending time with his partner. And the lack of women in the company, some said they wouldn't survive, but many of them don't either. So I
Okay,
a little
Marie,
my approach.
Marie Laverge is speaking. I'm sorry, I cannot use my camera. So I have a question for you, Céline. In the examples you gave, such as combining occupational safety and health with gender or with training, these dimensions were already part of your ergonomic intervention design, but this wasn't the case for all the three axes together. Still, you identified links between them, as I know. So at what point and in what way did you bring together occupational safety and health, gender, and training in your research planning and methodology? And what were the main insights you gained from integrating all three dimensions together?
It's a big question. Thank you, Marie. Okay, I will begin with this example. I have two. The first time was with Karen Messing's team following a request from shelters for women victims of domestic violence, which are collectively and feministly managed to support the residents and the counselors. Burnout and psychological distress, complex and unpredictable work, regulations of everything, lack of money, space, staff, lack of recognition of their expertise, difficulties with recruitment, retention, and training. A shelter in crisis with a strong desire to find solutions accepted my intervention. With individual and group interviews, observations of work, team activities, and validation confrontations individually and with the team. One of the findings was that the junior counselors working mainly in the evenings and weekends lacked opportunities to learn and work with the senior staff. who moreover rarely explain in detail their interventions. The learning process was therefore very long before becoming a full-fledged counselor, their greatest desire. This result shocked the senior counselors, and a working meeting with her and then with the entire team led to improvements to the training, but first to modify employment status and schedules to share responsibilities and promote intergenerational learning, including individual and group support. A year later, the staff was stable. Coordination tasks were distributed. All counselors were participating in direct interventions, and the senior counselors were thinking about retirement. However, a shadow hung over the issue. The difficulty of maintaining the training model due to the lack of time. The training needed to be transformed, but also the work and collective expertise had changed. Balanced work training needed to be retaught. You know, building work training coherence in respect to ergonomic analysis approach involves considering, as Delgoulet Santos pointed out, the inseparable relationship between health, skills, production, which is based on work in context, on a systemic, participatory, and multidisciplinary approach. And let's remember, on an inclusive approach for women and men, juniors and seniors, as demonstrated by the work of Delgoulet EA colleagues and Cobaret and colleagues too. This contributes to knowledge produced with people concerned to design empowering situations for the individual, the collective, and the organization, as detailed by Pierre Fazon in the collective work Constructive Ergonomics. Another important moment where these three axes intersected occurred in connection with my work as professor, training teachers in vocational training schools. The students, both women and men, from a wide variety of trades, truly wanted to share their love of the trade, but many have left due to health problems. I had initiated research on a vocational training center on the occupational health of students and teachers, which provided material for my 3 courses and vice versa. You can see the titles of the course, Occupational Health and Safety, from the trade to teaching the trade, learning to think through the trade, ergonomics in the service of vocational training. They include reflective activities within and across professions, and tools for verbalization, analysis, and argumentation, with a review of previous professional practice and current teaching practice, the analysis of situations, determinants, impacts from the perspective of those who teach and those who learn, the design of activities that promote the verbalization of gesture and cognitive processes, and participating in organizational and pedagogical developments within their institutions. During this time, I was building a social partnership in order to study 4 dimensions that you can see on the slide. 4 dimensions of occupational health and safety in training centers, which seem interrelated, and they were. And for each dimension, the participation of women and men, teachers and students from traditionally female and male trades. And I'm very proud that all the invited partners agreed to participate in the monitoring committee. The study was conducted in the hairdressing and electromechanics programs. Learning takes place in workshops. Students develop injuries before entering the workplace, which affect women and men differently. And there is an overlap of injuries among students and teachers. The same MSDs, musculoskeletal disorders in hairdressing, and some of the same injuries in electromechanics. Teachers are calling for support in managing students' occupational health and safety. Management invests primarily in programs where there is a high risk of accidents related to machines or equipment. These programs are predominantly male. Hairdressing teachers, female, deplore the poor quality of the learning environments and the sexual harassment of girls by male students. In electromechanics, some male students proudly declare that they bully the only female student in their program. We're preparing her for the workforce. An analysis of the OHS content prescribed by the Ministry of Education reveals differential treatment. In hairdressing, the emphasis is on being careful, maintaining one's workstation. Students would like to be taught about the reality in the workplace. In electromechanics, students analyze the sources of risk in order to participate in the prevention in their environments. OHS teaching practices are varied and poorly coordinated, as also noted by Robin Castonguay, who is continuing his work on the subject. Despite the methodological challenge represents and its certain limitations, I was able to observe the co-activity of trainees, the collective activity within student groups, and of teachers outside of teaching time. Sorry. A combination of micro and macro determinants influences these situations. Several external prescriptions and expectations can be paradoxical, which causes tensions. Methodological developments are necessary to fully understand this complexity, to restore the balance between health, skills, and production for everyone. Multidisciplinarity is also necessary, particularly with disciplines that contribute to improving the balance between health, skills, and production. For example, the discussion I had last year with Pascal Simonet, who combines ergonomic and clinical activities, were enriching for me. There was some positive outcomes. However, the publication of the results and a tool for reflection on intervention in training centers stimulated the social partners. All the partners invited me to present the results, but it was primarily Nicole Maton from OHS Commission who reminded the partners to take charge of the situation. Requested an international literature review on the integration of OHS into yacht training, which I prepared with my colleague Lise Desmarais. We established an inter-university consultation table to develop a coordinated approach to OHS, developed also a OHS skill framework for teacher training, created a reference framework for students in the technical sector. So there are many relevant developments in terms of training. but the connection with work remains to be verified, and we have to continue the work. I would like to take this opportunity to mention that Robin Castonguay founded a multidisciplinarity OHS committee within the Québec Vocational Training Observatory to support OHS in training centers with the active participation of teachers and other stakeholders in the field. It was based on my work and also other contributions. Okay, I believe, I don't know, Marie, if you found the answer at your question.
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Okay, so I will finish this presentation with a question and a wish. I have a concern in the current global socioeconomic context, with a labor market weakened by job losses in several countries. We can assume that the occupational health and safety of women and men is several treated sector risk following, excuse me, I repeat, maybe it will be less important in the list of priorities. How can we stimulate the development of equitable and enabling ergonomic interventions for all women and men? For me, this is an ethical, methodological, and practical question that can impact the training of ergonomists, which in my opinion should also aim for enabling conditions for the ergonomics community. I am now retired. Otherwise, I would invite you to a brainstorming session to imagine what's next. I know the next generation is there. In Quebec, I'm thinking in particular of Vanessa Rimry, who took over notably to develop my courses and continue the research, and of the teams of Marie Laberge and Jessica Riel, who are active in the coordination of occupational health and safety, gender, and training. So thank you for your presence, your attention. And before your questions, I would like to thank my TC chair colleagues and IEA and my central pillar, Henri Beauregard, who has always accompanied me and supported me and is still here today. And I inform you that the PowerPoint and the reference will be available, thank you, on the website, IEA website. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Celine, for such an enlightening and generous presentation. It has been a true privilege to hear you reflect on your professional journey. Your capacity to connect research, fieldwork, and real-world challenge is truly inspiring. Thank you so much for accepting this invitation and for sharing your time, knowledge, and experience with us so openly. So now we have a short moment for questions. I invite participants to send any final thoughts or questions via Q&A, and I will try to select a couple before we wrap up. And to open this space for discussion, I have already a question, and is this one. What would you say is the most enjoyable for you in your work? The interviews, the analysis, the purpose? What do you say, Celine, for this first question?
What was more enjoyable that in the work I did?
Yes, it's a question posed by, I'm sorry for the pronunciation, Wiseness Tatianou.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very nice question. It's difficult and difficult. I believe it was the contact with people in the workplaces. For me, I believe you understood that I was really so touched all my life by the work situations in trades that we say they are manual, but not just that. The complexity of this type of work is really high, and to have the opportunity to enter in workplaces to discuss, observe, and reflect with those persons, women and men, was the most beautiful thing I did, and I had the opportunity to benefit. And the other side of this, I don't know the word médaille in English. The other face of this of that is all the work. I had the opportunity to develop the methods, process, to be able to do that with respect and to go very far in the comprehension of the work. And that was possible because we were a team and a network. And for that, gender and work and EWAT networks were very important for me. And I will take some seconds to share that all the colleagues in EWAT and Gender and Works are friends now, because we were able to work on our topics and to develop together and inform us where we were in those developments. And it's a really nice opportunity for me to to have this moment now.
Thank you, Celine. We have another question. This one is from Karen Messing, and she asks, could you comment on the possibility of integrating a male gender perspective in training to reduce risk for men and all?
If I understand well, if not, you will explain me, Karen. Thank you for this question. It's interesting. I believe that maybe it's not another method or another perspective if we have a gender sensitive approach. What I have seen in masculine workplaces, trades, and female workplaces, it's sure they live their work differently, or they have other problems, but the problem is the same. It's the culture and the gender way, the gender impact in workplaces. Do we need a different approach, or just take time to integrate each time in our interventions the sensibility to look, observe, and hear what women and men have to say, how they work? It seems for me the same process, but maybe the approach can be different. It's an I believe this question, I would like to hear your response at this question, because you are the specialist who have developed all this approach for gender-based analysis. We have to continue. I'm not sure of my, we have to discuss that. Thank you.
Next steps, sir. Sure. So for the moment, I don't see any questions, but I have one. So I will put it. And it's about the work that we have been doing together, both TCs. So could you suggest some possible directions to help foster the development of the ergonomic work analysis and training and gender and work networks, mainly with regard to their impact on ergonomists and other practitioners and workplaces?
Yeah, thank you, Martha. I remember there was, like today, it's maybe the first time we have an organization of the encounters of two TCs and networks, gender and work and training. And another time it was, I believe, in Beijing, the IEA Congress in 2012, maybe. It was the first time we succeed to organize a conjoint meeting, and it was very rich and interesting to explore how we can integrate both preoccupation. It's not an obligation to enter with, for example, my 3 axes, but even if we don't put in explicitly in the design of an intervention, they are related. And probably all the topics all of you work, and I asked me if can be possible to organize in each Congress and also between Congress some large reflection. For example, I ask me many times for gender and work and for training also, the methodology is the same or not. We have to develop specific methods to investigate one or other topics. And each time I finish by the model of the situation of work that I use. Here we have an image from Marie Laberge and Justine. And we are able, with this very systemic approach, we are able to touch all determinants, all causes of good and bad effects on health, on performance, on and skills. And we are not able to investigate everything each time. It's impossible, but we can help us to share some results we have. For example, you don't do an intervention about explicitly on gender and work, but you have results interesting about that we can share to reinforce our comprehension, and maybe the methodology also we have to develop. So maybe I know everybody works a lot. It's not easy to add new activities, but many times c'est quoi rêver? I dream. Thank you. I dream about that, to be able to have, for example, a databases with results specific about one or other points that we can share, even if we don't have a design explicit about one thematic invisible. It's for that I have to remember that Karen Messing, the word, the invisibility, it was so important, and that's the thing we always search in ergonomics, but sometimes there is a lot of levels that we have to analyze to be able to go to enter in the forest, in the complexity. It's not an answer. I'm very lucid about that, but maybe we can do something to reinforce our links between the TC chairs or committees, networks.
Thank you, Celine, once again. I don't have any more questions in the Q&A. I'm looking in the chat. There's a lot of people that are thanking you, and we are about to finish this session. So before we finish, I have just a few brief announcements that I would like to have. Oh, it's another question, Celine. It's
Okay.
arriving before the brief announcements. So it's a question from Portugal, the Sara Maggioli, and she is asking, during your experience, have you found that certain types of training ending up reinforcing existing gender roles? What would you advise to deal with this when planning training?
I missed something, Marta. I'm sorry, I didn't understood everything. Could you translate me or repeat?
I'm trying to repeat. If not, I will try to translate. But if the training may ending up reinforce the existing gender roles?
If training may reinforce gender roles.
Est-ce que tu penses que la formation peut perpétuer certains stéréotypes?
Why, sure. Okay. Oh, thank you, Marie. Okay, sorry, you have seen my English is not my first language. Yeah, sure. It's the case. In general, it's the case, actually. It's that I have seen in each situation. Sometimes it's very explicit with comments very directly influenced by gender, way that we interpret health and safety, or work, or the sharing of responsibilities. But many times it's not explicit, but for example, the time the trainer invests to discuss or hear the experiential knowledge of women and men during the training, it was so different. It was crazy. But also maybe in our interventions in ergonomics, because it's difficult to enter, it depends in which workplaces. For example, in shelters for women victims of violence, conjugal violence, it was clear. They wanted to, we entered with gender, we entered with training and with OHS. It was easy and necessary to talk about that very quickly and it was possible to discuss that during the interventions. They were so fast. they began changes so quickly that it was a very rapid project. And sometimes it's not possible. And Marie, Karen, and other colleagues in the study I pointed out before, I have a question. Is it necessary to enter with a very explicit approach about gender? And it can be the case also in training, not just in the intervention, ergonomic intervention, but when we propose changes in a training, it can be a subject very clear. The elephant in the room will be there, and we have to decide with which strategies we will considerate the gender problems that the people encounter directly or not. And it depends the situation, but if we don't do something about that, if we don't reflect how we will approach those problems, but this is like you close your eyes and your ear and you don't do nothing. It depends our margin of maneuver, okay? But also, if we decide or not to try to have an equitable approach in our interventions, in our trainings that we do naturally in the projects, in the process of intervention or training when we propose changes in the training. I hope it's clear, but I'm not so sure.
I think
Yeah, do you think the answer is clear for now?
Yes, Celine, thank you very much. Of course, it's not resolved the problem, but it's this idea that we have to not consider these dimensions when we plan training. We have to face this issue when we conceive training. So I think we don't have any. Yes, we don't have more questions. So let me finish, but before make a few brief announcements. And for those that are listening to us, that are with us in this webinar, if you are interested in these themes and not yet a member of the Ergonomic Work Analysis and Training or Gender and Work Technical Committees, we warmly encourage you to join. You can register through each TC pages on the IEA website, and once you sign up, you'll receive updates on future initiatives. Some highlights: the Gender and Work TC will be featured on the SELF Congress in Paris this July, including a plenary session, a roundtable that will discuss the reflections on the integration of gender in ergonomics, challenge, progress, and current issues with Isabelle Probst and Jessica Riel, and a symposium on technical and organizational transformations, design, and gender, coordinated by Liliana Cunha, Danielle Silva, Fabienne Gutille, and Isabelle Probst. There is also a call for papers open for the special issue Ergonomics, Gender and Sustainability in the International Journal of Industrial Ergonomics until October 1 of this year. The Ergonomic Work Analysis and Training TC is developing a new initiative on knowledge transmission led by Jean Thibault and Claudia Pereira, aiming to consolidate and share valuable research more widely. The intention is to share this work in upcoming events, starting hopefully at next year's SELF and certainly at the next IEA Congress. Once again, and to close, a heartfelt thank you to Celine for your inspiring contribution to this joint activity between our technical committees. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We look forward to meet you again at our next event. Thank you.